So imagine spending like your absolute best energy, your time, burning your relationships, and just sweating blood to win this brutal, all-consuming war.
Right, where the stakes just feel completely apocalyptic.
Exactly. And then suddenly your perspective shifts and the camera just aggressively zooms out.
Yeah.
And you realize you were fighting a battle over literally a single millimeter of territory on the horn of a snail.
Yeah, the horn of a snail, such a jarring visual.
It really is.
Okay.
And, that is the gut punch analogy we are starting with today in this deep dive. We are looking at a text that suggests that is basically exactly what you are doing with your life right now.
It is, yeah. And we're pulling from a piece today called Chapter of Celestial Cultivation, Article 4. And the subtitle is Clarity Through Detachment, Reaching Far Through Tranquility. It's by the author Shifeng.
Right.
And what he's doing here is weaving together two absolute titans of ancient Chinese philosophy. So we've got the Kai Zhen Tan, which translates to the vegetable root discourse, and also the Xianguang, or the expanded words of the worthy. So Shifeng is using these texts to present a roadmap that feels, honestly, entirely backwards to how we operate today. He's basically arguing that the only way to achieve your absolute highest long-term goals is by fundamentally stepping back.
Which is just wild, right? And the text actually anchors itself right away with a historical figure, Zhu Yang. And knowing his history just creates this massive paradox right out of the gate for me.
Oh, totally. Zhu Jiang is, he's the epitome of wisdom.
Right. We know him as the ultimate wartime strategist.
Yeah.
He spent his entire life basically bleeding for the warlord Liu Bei's campaign.
Yep, after Liu Bei visited his humble thatched cottage 3 times just to recruit him.
Exactly. So he's literally working himself to death in the middle of all this political chaos and warfare. Yet the core lesson he passed down to his children, which is the foundation of our source today, is that without detachment, you cannot establish clear aspirations.
And without tranquility, you cannot achieve great distances.
Yes. So how does a guy orchestrating military campaigns preach detachment? Okay, let's unpack this. What does detachment actually mean here? Because to a modern ear, to me, it just sounds like giving up, just checking out.
You're hitting on the exact friction point that trips up most modern readers, I think. We hear the word detachment and we immediately translate it to apathy.
Right, like I just don't care anymore.
Exactly. But Shifeng is very specific with his terminology here. Apathy is the death of action. Detachment, at least in this philosophical framework, is actually a highly active lens for clarity.
Okay, wait, a lens.
Yeah, it's a psychological mechanism. The source material argues that fiercely fighting for wealth and status is as futile as flies scrambling for blood or ants swarming over carrion.
Ew. It's a gross image, but it works. It's an issue of cognitive capture, isn't it? Like when you are emotionally entangled in every minor slight, every, Slack notification, every tiny fluctuation in your status at work.
Your vision narrows.
Yes. It narrows right down to that snail's horn. You think you are fighting for survival, but you're just reacting to microstimuli.
But that is the exact mechanism at play. So detachment is the intentional act of cognitive distancing. You aren't severing your emotions or turning into a stone or anything. You are widening the gap between a trigger and your reaction.
I see.
The text explicitly states that people who are fighting over wealth and status are essentially debating in a flash of lightning.
A flash of lightning. Whoa.
Right, so it's an issue of scale, both in space, like you said, the snail's horn.
And in time with the lightning flash.
Exactly. When you detach, you are shifting your temporal and spatial awareness. You zoom out far enough to discern the actual path, rather than just obsessing over the rocks in your shoes.
Okay, let me push back on the application of this, though. Because if I zoom out far enough to see that my daily tasks are just a flash of lightning on a snail's horn, doesn't that inherently just kill my ambition?
What?
Like, if it doesn't matter, why am I bothering to build a business or aim for a promotion at all?
What's fascinating here is that you are confusing the fuel source. Ambition that's fueled by anxiety or ego or the need to just outpace the person next to you is a highly volatile, really inefficient fuel.
Okay. I see.
The Kai Zhen Tan states this beautifully. It says, detachment clarifies purpose, indulgence corrupts integrity. So the goal isn't to empty your mind of all desire. The goal is to stop getting entangled in the superficial, visible realm so you can focus entirely on the foundational architecture of your life.
Oh, I get it. So it's like a reallocation of resources.
Yeah, exactly.
If I stop spending all my cognitive currency on obsessing over office politics or, I don't know, comparing myself to a stranger's curated life on social media, I suddenly have this massive surplus of energy.
Right.
So detachment isn't doing nothing. It's almost like cutting out the junk food expenses of the mind, so I can actually afford to invest in what actually moves the needle.
Yes. It gathers your energy instead of scattering it. Indulgence, whether that's in rich foods, vanity, or even just the quick dopamine hit of a petty argument online, it scatters your focus. Detachment pulls it all back to the center.
But, okay, if detachment is clearing out all that mental debris, what fills the space? Because nature hates a vacuum, right? If I strip away the hustle, the noise, the constant striving for the next shiny thing, I feel like I'm left alone in a very quiet room.
And honestly, for a lot of people, that sounds terrifying.
It does.
But it's terrifying because our baseline for stimulation is completely blown out. And the sources actually point us toward the remedy for this, which is finding profound value in simplicity and stillness.
Stillness, okay.
Yeah, the author notes that reading the Kaizen Tan brings clarity and dispels confusion, like clearing away clouds. It argues that simplicity reveals true flavor, and the ordinary reveals true brilliance.
Huh. Simplicity reveals true flavor.
It's basically an ancient version of a dopamine reset. When you stop drowning your palate in artificial flavors, you suddenly realize how incredibly complex and nourishing a simple glass of water actually is.
Which is a direct argument against extremes. Like, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because our current culture, modern hustle culture, we worship the intense, the grind.
Oh, absolutely.
We idolize the bonfire because it's spectacular and loud and bright. But the text says something like, what is intense fades quickly, right? What is subtle endures.
Exactly. A bonfire consumes its fuel rapidly and then it just turns to ash. It's inherently unsustainable. Great achievements take time to mature. The text actually advises against both excessive richness and excessive barrenness. It advocates for that subtle ember that endures.
Right.
And Shui Feng uses these beautiful, challenging paradoxes to explain how this feels in practice. One line that really stands out is, stillness in motion is true stillness. Joy amid suffering is true joy.
Man, that line stopped me in my tracks when I read the source. Stillness in motion is true stillness. Because anyone can be calm when they're sitting on a yoga mat in a temperature-controlled room with absolutely no responsibilities.
Exactly. That's just conditional stillness.
Right. But the text is demanding something much harder than that.
It's demanding portable stillness. It's the ability to maintain a steady internal heart rate while the world around you is literally exploding.
Which is so hard.
It is. The text asks you to imagine your mind as a body of water. It says, when the heart is still, the essence reveals itself. When water is clear, the moon's reflection is bright.
So if your mind is this turbulent, churning lake driven by anxiety and ambition, the reflection of the moon, which is like your actual purpose, is just this shattered, chaotic light. You can't make any sense of it.
Right. You have to let the sediment settle to actually see the picture.
But okay, let's bring this down to earth for a second. Because achieving that still water is great in theory. But how do I keep the water still when someone is actively throwing rocks into it?
That is the big question.
Right. Like, what happens when you step out of your door and the world is chaotic, it's treacherous, and it's actively deeply unfair to you?
Well, the sources don't shy away from that reality at all. This is where the wisdom of the Lifechanyuan enters the picture, and it pulls no punches about the brutality of the world.
No, it definitely does not.
It doesn't tell you to just smile and pretend everything is fine. It warns that the burning desire for profit is a pit of fire, and greed is a sea of suffering.
Right.
It fully acknowledges the external chaos, but insists that tranquility acts as an internal anchor. Without it, your soul is just drifting aimlessly, getting battered by whatever storm rolls in.
And it uses a fascinating, albeit kind of dark psychological trick to force that anchor to drop. It brings up the desolate graves of Beimang.
Yeah, that famous historical burial ground.
Right. And it points out that in those graves, there is absolutely no distinction between the rich and the poor. The flesh and blood body is just a fleeting shadow. I mean, it's an incredibly morbid perspective, but strangely liberating.
Oh, it's the ultimate perspective setter. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the moment you visceralize your own mortality, the fact that you were, say, passed over for a promotion, it suddenly loses its existential weight.
Yeah, okay.
And the text doesn't just rely on the whole "we're all gonna die" argument. It offers a mechanical view of how the world operates using these really stark animal metaphors. It says a dragon in shallow water might be mocked by shrimp, and a tiger on flat land might be bullied by dogs.
I feel like everyone listening to this has been the dragon in shallow water at some point.
Mhm.
You know that feeling when you are stuck in some bureaucratic nightmare, surrounded by petty people who just don't understand your vision,
Oh, definitely.
and they are just pecking you to death with administrative nonsense.
And your immediate instinct in that moment is to fight the shrimp, to get angry, to demand fairness, to scream that you are a dragon.
Yes. You want to prove you're the dragon.
But the text argues that is a fundamental misunderstanding of nature. It says, the wicked may be feared by others, but not by heaven. It basically suggests that autumn insects and spring birds are both just expressing nature's workings. There is no need to indulge in unnecessary sorrow or joy over it.
Right, they're just doing their thing.
Exactly. The shrimp are acting like shrimp. The dogs are acting like dogs. Getting angry at a shrimp for behaving like a shrimp is a failure of your own tranquility, not a failure of the shrimp.
That is such a good way to frame it. So basically, yes, your boss might be a shrimp, but you can't get mad at a shrimp for doing shrimp things. It's just weather. You don't scream at the rain for making you wet. You just put up an umbrella.
Exactly.
So the text is telling us to categorize toxic people and unfair systems as mechanical forces of nature rather than these personal malicious attacks.
That is the core of it, yes. You observe the mechanics. It's like you watch the chaotic play from the director's booth rather than being dragged onto the stage yourself.
Oh, I like that, the director's booth.
You can see the drama, you can navigate the actors, but you never forget that it's a play. You refuse to let the fictional stakes destroy your real piece. The text is incredibly explicit here. It says, "Let the world's path be treacherous, my heart remains at peace." You aren't denying the treachery, you are just denying its access to your internal weather.
I mean, I buy that. But if I am sitting in the director's booth, viewing the treacherous world as a play, and treating difficult people like autumn insects, just acting out their programming, don't I just become a sociopath?
Oh, well.
Like, I'd be completely isolated. A peaceful heart is vital, sure, but the source material makes a really surprising pivot here. It insists that this journey of cultivation absolutely cannot be walked alone.
It's a brilliant tension, honestly. We have this persistent myth of the enlightened sage sitting all alone on a mountain, but Shufeng shatters that. He actually quotes Francis Bacon to drive the point home, which is quite the crossover.
Wait, yeah, I noticed that. That's a wild pull for a text based on ancient Chinese philosophy.
Right. But the quote is perfect. Bacon says, "The lack of true friendship is the most profound and pitiable solitude. Without friendship, the world is but a wilderness." And the Chinese text echoes this perfectly, insisting that those who walk alone lack steadfastness. You require fellow cultivators.
Which just feels like a massive contradiction to me. Like, be entirely detached from the world, but also, hey, you desperately need friends. How do those two things coexist?
This raises an important question, right? How do we find true friends? Well, by redefining what a friend actually is, the text argues that it is only through detachment that you can form a true friendship.
Really?
Yeah. If you are not detached, your relationships are inevitably transactional. The source actually outlines a pretty brutal taxonomy of false friendships. It says forming a bond based on someone's power is mere flattery. Forming a bond through bribery is mutual exploitation.
It also mentions friendships born out of shared misfortune, right? It calls this bowing under the eaves, meaning you are only huddling together because you are both trying to stay out of the rain. The modern equivalent of this is trauma bonding in a toxic workplace. Like, you think you are best friends with your coworker because you both hate your manager, but the minute one of you gets a new job, you literally never speak again. The bond wasn't real, it was just shared weather.
Spot on. Those are utilitarian friendships. They are based entirely on a calculation of benefit or shared grievance. The text drops a cynical but highly accurate proverb here. It says, "The rich in the mountains have distant relatives, the poor in the city have no visitors."
Wow.
If your connections are based on what you can extract from each other, you are deeply vulnerable to any change in circumstance.
And then the text delivers what might be my favorite analogy in the entire stack. It says, the friendship of a noble person is like water. The friendship of a petty person is like sweet wine.
It's so good. It captures the mechanism of indulgence versus simplicity perfectly.
Think about sweet wine. It is intensely flavorful at first. It gives you a rush. It's intoxicating. A sweet wine friendship is the person who gossips with you, who enable your worst impulses, who brings all the high drama.
Right. It's thrilling for a moment.
But you can't survive on it. It ruins your palate, it gives you a massive hangover, and eventually just makes you sick.
Whereas water, on the other hand, is subtle.
Mm.
It might even seem flavorless to someone whose palate is blown out by sweet wine. But water sustains life indefinitely.
Yeah.
A detached friendship, a water friendship, is based on shared values and mutual cultivation. It's a friend who can just sit in silence with you. It doesn't require frantic exchange of favors or emotional highs to maintain its structure. It is steady, clear, and essential.
Okay, so we've built this massive philosophical architecture today. We've gone from redefining detachment to the snail's horn, to finding the moon's reflection in still water, to dodging the shrimp and seeking the water friendships.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. But Zifang ends this entire piece in a way that honestly caught me totally off guard. He doesn't end on an abstract, lofty philosophical note. He grounds this entire thing in a highly personal, deeply urgent reality regarding time.
The tone shift is profound, isn't it? Xufeng steps out from behind the ancient quotes and offers a deeply vulnerable personal reflection.
Yeah.
He writes that reaching his current age, he feels profound regret. He says his youthful years have flowed away like water and time wasted is irretrievable. He looks back and realizes that had he walked this path of detachment and tranquility earlier in his life, his spiritual achievements would be complete by now.
That is just tragic, to have all this wisdom, to clearly see the mechanics of the universe, but to realize you spent decades of your prime fighting on the snail's horn before you finally zoomed out.
It speaks to a very specific psychological trap that I think high achievers fall into. We suffer from the arrival fallacy. We tell ourselves, I will cultivate tranquility after I get the promotion.
Right.
Or I will find peace after my bank account hits a certain number. I will step into the director's booth after I win this one last battle on the stage.
Always after. But Schweffing is saying he played that game. He lived through the flash of lightning, and he realized the game itself was the distraction. The pursuit of the external marker was the very thing preventing the internal clarity.
Exactly. And his conclusion from this realization is not despair. It is a highly urgent call to action. He says all that remains is to treasure every moment and strive with diligence.
So what does this all mean for you listening? The choice to quiet the mind isn't something you schedule for next quarter. It is immediate. You start today. You don't wait for the world to stop throwing rocks into your lake. You cultivate the depths so the rocks don't disturb the bottom.
You practice the cognitive distancing today. When the unfair email comes in, you don't fight the shrimp. You drop the anchor.
We spend so much of our lives trying to add things to our existence. We think if we aggregate enough knowledge, enough wealth, enough sweet wine connections, we will eventually feel secure.
But the fundamental insight from Xue from the Kaigan and from the graves of Beimang, is that true clarity and actual progress come from what you are willing to let go of.
It is the subtraction of the noise that reveals the signal.
It's the realization that the horizon has always been there, just obscured by your own frantic movement.
So as you go back into your day, into the noise and the friction, I want to leave you with a final thought to carry with you. Look closely at your life right now. What is one sweet wine relationship or one snail's horn argument you are fiercely, desperately holding on to, convinced that it matters, when it is actually the very thing keeping you from reaching the far horizon? Answer that honestly, and you might just find your tranquility. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will see you next time.